I am Madison Timmons.
I'm Chris Susi.
And we're paranormal specialists who live in the most haunted city on earth, Savannah, Georgia. Every day is Halloween in our line of work, so join us as we spin true tales of haunts, murders, and disturbing Savannah history. I'm Madison.
I'm Chris.
And welcome to the most haunted city on earth. Hey there, ghosts and ghouls. I want to first say thank you for listening and following this podcast. We are so grateful for such a wonderful fan base. If you'd like to support this podcast further and help us constantly improve and sustain, we've enabled listener support, and you can find that link at the end of our bio on Spotify. Enjoy the episode. Hello and welcome back, ghosts and ghouls. We are back with another Q&A Tuesday. So again, we have combed through our TikTok and our Instagram to find more questions that you guys have about the paranormal, and we're here to answer it to the best of our abilities. So let's go ahead and dive right into it.
Oh, yeah. All right. So here we go. Let's see. The first question is, why is it bad luck to break a mirror?
So, there's a lot of answers to that question. One of my favorites is that mirrors were very expensive. And so breaking a mirror was bad luck because they would say that it would take 7 years to pay off your mirror. So that was one of the very constants. As a matter of fact, spilling salt was the same thing. Salt being very, very expensive. If you spilled it, it was bad luck, so you have to throw salt over your left shoulder to blind the evil spirit that's coming at you. But if you wanted to go into a more in-depth concept of why is it bad luck to break a mirror, the concept is that when a spirit inhabits any item, when it possesses any item, that item becomes its body. And when its body is broken, the spirit is released. So it is very similar to...
Bless me.
It is very similar to the human body. When our body breaks, the spirit is released. Well, if there is a spirit in your mirror and it breaks, the concept being the body broke, and by the rules of our metaphysical identity and concept, the spirit gets to be released from the broken thing. So if you have a doll and you break it, or a Ouija board and you burn it, whenever you destroy the body that a spirit has inhabited, that spirit becomes able to cross through. That is, of course, a lot of superstitions piled on top of each other. But it is an interesting concept to suggest that when spirits possess something, that thing, whatever it is, becomes its body, it becomes its home, and we have built an entire ideology and belief around the idea that when a spirit's home is broken, that spirit is free. It is released from whatever confines it had before.
Interesting. My Mimi always used to tell me about the salt thing. Yeah. But I never knew why. You know, she'd always be like, just throw it over your shoulder.
Right. If you spill salt, you're supposed to throw it over your left shoulder because evil can only approach you from the left. So you have to throw it over your left shoulder, and it's supposed to go into the eye of the evil spirit. And that's a fun little thing because it lasted forever, and people didn't really completely know why. They knew, because salt actually plays a big role in a lot of magic. Absolutely. You can use salt to seal off areas. Evil spirits can't cross over salt, things of that nature. So salt was a valuable commodity. And anything of high value does, through time, become a supernatural, superstitious product.
Gotcha.
Absolutely. Yeah, they even talk about it in Practical Magic where they're like, they do the monologue at the end where they're like, always throw salt over your left shoulder, plant rosemary by your garden. Things like that have always been like rooted in our culture, and especially in the South, I think.
I want to say that in a lot of media, you'll find salt used. There was a movie called Warlock where they would put salt on the threshold of a door so that a witch couldn't come through the door because there was salt barricading the door.
Sure.
And a lot of people believe that if you put a salt circle around you to do any of your divination or any of your spirit work, it'll keep evil spirits from getting to you.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Cool.
So you got a bonus.
Do you have anything to add?
I don't think so. I think Chris
All
covered it.
right,
I figured
yeah.
he was going to have a really good answer for that.
Absolutely. All right, so y'all, this one is a very serious question. And by the way, that last question came from Claudine.Hubert, not Hubert, or it might be Hubert. I don't know. Anyway, I just wanted to say that. So, this next one's a very serious one. AAMXK12 asked us, "My mom passed away a while ago. Been hoping to dream of her since. I miss her so much, but if I do dream of her, she's trying to get away from me. Why?"
Yeah. So that's a really interesting concept. A lot of times, people, when they lose a loved one, they're so desperate to have any kind of grasp of that person back. And sometimes it does turn to obsession. And I'm not saying that you're obsessed or anything like that, but sometimes it can become so unhealthy, this like need to feel that attachment again, that the spirit doesn't necessarily want to give in to that need, if that makes sense. So if if you're using maybe dreaming of your mom as the way to cope with the grieving process and whatnot, the reason maybe why she's running away from you is maybe she's trying to show you like this is not the way. That's just personally how I would perceive that. Sometimes our past loved ones, our loved ones in general, are always going to have our best interests at heart. And I'm sure your mom especially would know what's the best for you. And maybe she's seeing how hard this is for you. And she's like, well, maybe I can visit her in other ways that are going to be a little bit less draining, if you will, where if you don't see your mom in your dreams, where maybe you are going to get upset every time you don't see her or things like that. So maybe she's visiting you in other ways. So that way it brings comfort, but there's a lack of, this is the only way I can be with my mom. Hopefully that kind of makes sense. But
Yeah, absolutely. And I think even further to the point is the concept of grief, pain. Your loved ones do not want to see you in pain. And even though their presence may bring you comfort, it is comfort through pain. And that suggests that maybe you are not at peace with the passing, and thereby the sensation would be agitation, would be anxiety. There's a chance that, and it's such a wide open thing and we don't have answers, but it's very possible that what you're dealing with is being protected from the trauma of the loss. Maybe, again, trying to stay on the side of supposition, of guesswork, really. Maybe there is a process that you still need to go through to accept the passing, to let go a little, so that when she does come, it's not a source of pain. One of the scary things is the idea of this obsession of becoming obsessed with someone who has gone to the other side. Means you're not paying attention to the life you're living. You are now more involved or more invested in this other world, the beyond. And if you're not living a full life on the beyond, no loved one wants you to spend your time fixated or investing all of your energies into the beyond. You have to be present for the life that you're leading, for the people in your life, for the living. We are living. So it's possible that your mother is acting in a sense of protection, so that you don't rely on signs from beyond or a relationship with the beyond. Maybe it is a question of coming to terms before you can have a comfortable interaction with her. But there's a lot of directions to go, a lot of ways to interpret that kind of thing. But I do think that it may come from the fact that you're hurting so much. And loved ones do not want to be the source of your pain, nor do they want to contribute to it.
We actually received a video from a fan, and her Instagram name, that's her Instagram name, right?
Yes.
Is Beav. Beav. She lives here in Savannah, and this will be Chris's first time watching the video. I'll put the audio of the video on the podcast, but on YouTube you can see the video. And we also have permission from her to put the video on YouTube, so you can not YouTube, TikTok, so you can see it there. And so I'm going to show Chris, and I'm going to show Madison. I'll run it twice, and I'll do the same on the podcast and YouTube, but it is very, very creepy. All right, and this happened on Texas Street in Savannah.
Hi, man. Hi, man.
Okay, so just to explain what happened in this, what she explained is that she does not live with a guy, and in the beginning of the video, you hear a British man's voice. What I heard was "bye now," and her door was closed at that time, and she was shoved out of nowhere by a force, and right before the Ring camera caught the voice saying "bye now." So I know it's not like a question, but I guess react.
Yeah.
I guess go ahead and react to that, because, I hit her back. We've been in this conversation. I was like, that was crazy. And, there was only one other person in her home. It was her roommate, and that's a woman. She doesn't even sound like that. So very, very kind of creepy. You clearly hear "bye now."
Oh yeah, absolutely. I didn't even question whether or not somebody else was there. Some male person was saying something. If you've got video, send them in. That's really very interesting. Have you talked to her about doing an investigation there?
No, but maybe we should. Maybe we should.
Don't. Beyond saying that's a strange occurrence, I oftentimes. You can kind of categorize experiences, and when you start getting shoved, when you start having physical, contact with
that
a
ain't
spirit.
Normal. Oh no, absolutely not.
That's I love that, like Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Again, going back to movies, but it is the classifications of the kinds of encounters you have. There's sight, there's sound, there's contact. That kind of concept. You're going past a lot of different things. I wonder if there haven't been a lot of moments that hadn't been noticed.
Sure.
A building sensation of a spirit trying to communicate, trying to get attention. Because a lot of people think that that a haunting will come out of nowhere, only because the first time that they experienced it, it's something big. But it's oftentimes because the small things that the spirit was doing was not getting your attention. So it's building and building in its attempts to reach you.
That's interesting.
Because it's again, there's so many avenues you can go down. But I'm happily go on the record that if you're experiencing physical sensation from a spirit, you are dealing with a pretty powerful spirit.
Oh, absolutely. Well, it's interesting because I saw this video this morning when JT first got it, and I was shook because I was like, whoa, that's a lot of energy going on. But to kind of to go off of what Chris was saying, they had mentioned that the vibe was weird in the house and like something felt off. Like they could sense something was there, but they never had any kind of like really major experiences. So I completely agree in your like analysis of like they probably didn't pick up on the little things, so or just brushed them off as like, oh, I might have left that open, like or whatever. But it's true. It takes so much energy for a spirit to do anything.
He talked.
Exactly. So, and that's the point I'm trying to say is like, it takes so much energy for you just to hear what it has to say, let alone for a camera to pick it up.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so,
Well, yeah, I always try to explain, ghosts don't have vocal cords. There's nothing to make the sound. They're not making the sound by manipulating some physical aspect of themselves. So they are usually utilizing ambient sounds and trying to shape it. So that's why static is oftentimes employed, white noise is often employed to try to give them the building blocks to create the sounds.
Sure.
But that's open to interpretation. But when a voice comes through, that means it is utilizing some extra energy to vibrate, the frequencies that we hear. It's fascinating, really.
and the fact that it's so clear,
Yes.
too, is really surprising.
So he goes, bye now, while she's leaving, and then shoves her. And I'm like, that to
He said,
me,
"Get out my house."
Literally, that to me, like, I'm sure they will most likely disagree, but that to me screams demon. I in my opinion, 99.9% of ghosts are like energy, and if they're not just like, if they're actually like personifications that can communicate, they're nice. But just this person going bye now and then shoving her to hurt her. I mean,
Well, I don't know if it was trying to hurt her necessarily. It's just, and this is coming from somebody who has been pushed in ways by spirits. They're not always trying to hurt you by pushing you.
he said bye now.
Well, yeah.
She was leaving, though.
Yes. And so,
when you think about it, if you put all the pieces together, and I'm not saying not demon, but I am saying that if you really think about the concentration of what you're saying, he's saying bye now to a person who's leaving. It's not like,
shoving.
Yeah, and then he's shoving. But imagine that you're using every bit of your energy just to get through to a person, and it comes through like that.
Yeah.
Instead of being the act of I'm shoving you, it's notice me, or I want you to know that I'm here.
Kind of like a dog that is really excited to see you, buddy, real big.
Yeah.
Yes,
and it's
exactly.
using more and
And
more
him go-
energy, right?
Yeah.
And it may not have been a shove in the spirit's mind. It's just, how do I present myself to this person and let them know that I am paying attention to their movements, which is scary.
Yeah.
There's a lot of scary to it, but ultimately, you don't have to jump directly to damage, because usually,
I jumped to damage.
yes.
usually in cases like this, if you wanted to go demonic or dangerous, the result is a scratch, and it's usually a 3, a scratch of 3.
To mock God.
To mock God.
Yes.
And you'll see this in countless encounters. People talk about it, and they'll raise their sleeve or their shirt, and you'll see these 3 marks. That, in my mind, is usually when I start to really consider
Yeah.
I see.
the darker side of it, is because a shove is not the same as a scratch to me. A shove is
A push of energy.
a push of energy.
Yeah.
It's a physicality that you might not be able to control. You might not know how forceful you are or what the condition was, and that's where you come up with all the extra bells and whistles. Like, that might have been the very hour that he died in that house, giving him an extra blah 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 yakety schmackety. Might have been the date of his this, or it might have been a significant moment, and you could go on forever to come up with the reason why the conditions were amenable to him making the kind of contact that he did. But and of course, that's not absolving him, from being evil. There's a chance. There's always a chance. People suck. So, there's always the chance.
Maybe if y'all want, we can do an investigation of her house if she's
It
cool
cannot
with
hurt
it.
to reach out.
Yeah, absolutely, I will.
Yeah, we can get a clearer perspective if we can actually be there and try to interact.
And
with
is that
it.
a
So
doorbell
it's-
camera?
That's a doorbell camera. That's a Ring camera.
I love that Ring cameras are now becoming more and more a part of it, because the Ring cameras are catching things.
All over the place.
Aside from people stealing your Amazon boxes, they're catching amazingly strange things going on all over the country.
Oh, absolutely. There's whole YouTube compilations of the creepiest things caught on a Ring camera, and there's some freaky people out there. But
freaky people.
Yeah, like that old lady with a knife.
The what?
The old lady with the knife, she like goes up. You haven't seen that one?
No.
She like literally the ring comes on and like there's this old lady like just staring into the camera with the knife, and she's obviously it's like a silver alert issue.
Yeah.
Like she's got dementia, poor thing. But like it's creepy. It's creepy.
Cute. Love that.
All right, on to the next one. Thank you, Beeve, for that one. All right, why do ghosts wear clothes?
So,
Why do we wear clothes?
yeah,
Yeah.
right.
I know why.
But I feel like the reason why we do see spirits in clothing a lot of times is because we naturally put it on them. You know, like we are going, if you see a naked man standing in the corner of your room, that's going to be a lot more frightening than it would be if it's like, oh, there's a man with a hat and he's wearing a trench coat or something like that. I feel like a lot of times our eyes show us what we want to see. And then there is that concept of like spirits kind of want that identity that Chris has talked about, where if we tell the spirit, like, you're wearing a trench coat, he's like, yep, I'm wearing a trench coat. And over time, we just see that spirit as wearing the trench coat.
trench coat
So,
ghost.
Trench coat ghost.
you know, so that's what I think.
Yeah,
you
and
know.
I imagine that in most instances where you see a ghost, that ghost is presenting. It's showing itself. And you'd be hard pressed to find a wide range of people who are like, I'm going to go naked today. They will present themselves in a fashion that they feel represents them, so they will wear clothes that they identify with or things of that nature. And it's really a lot about our perception and the ability to present yourself, because that comes to this great question. I bring up Abraham Lincoln ghost a lot because it's just a good example. But Abraham Lincoln actually haunts several different places, and some people have seen what they believe is Abraham Lincoln at different ages. They've seen like the young Abraham Lincoln at his childhood home in Illinois, I think.
Yes, I think so.
and they'd see the president Abraham Lincoln at the White House, and that means that maybe the environment is as important to the perception of the spirit. So if you're at a place where the spirit lived all his life, then you see the spirit as they were in the environment. That's what they can draw energy-wise. So maybe if you see the ghost in the shower, it might be naked because that was where that ghost was naked, which is why I don't like bathroom ghosts.
Those are always naked.
I will tell you, I've had two experiences, one with a naked ghost and then one with, I've seen plenty of ghosts with clothes on. But like in the case of the little boy ghost that we showed a couple episodes back, so many people in that TikTok were spiraling because they're like, well, does that mean the bucket is a ghost? Is that a ghost? And I'm like, no, that's just something that he was using at that time. And if he is a residual energy of some sort, then, that would have been something that he had. So it is totally possible to also see a spirit with objects. Doesn't mean the object's
absolutely.
a ghost.
Yeah, Gettysburg. You'll always, there's lots of ghost photography at Gettysburg, ghost videos, and they're almost always in uniform. They're almost always carrying a rifle. A lot of people hear battle sounds, and we'll see soldiers with their rifles and in uniform, and that is because of the energy of the place as much as it is the fact that they woke up and got dressed.
And I will tell you the other experience too with the naked spirit was actually in this building when, and I've briefly mentioned this spirit before when we were hanging lights in here and things like that. I was up on the scaffolding rig and I look down and I see a naked African American man curled up in a ball, like basically looking frightened because he looked like he was trying to hide somewhere. And that also makes sense for the nature of this building because of where it is. More than likely, what I kind of deduced that spirit to be was probably a man who was trying to run away from the slave trade. And this was a swamp area, a really easy place to hide because nobody wants to go look for you in the swamp. So, it's...
I actually, it's odd. I had met an older woman who believed that there was a ghost in her house, and she believed that the ghost was a peeping Tom. So she used to bathe in a bathing suit. She used to wear a bathing suit into the bathtub. And so she tells me this whole story, and it's just, it's kind of cute and well-meaning, and I don't think anything of it. Years later, I go to visit her, and she had passed. And it was her grandson tells me that they believe that she had committed suicide. And I was like, oh, that's very tragic. What happened? And he's like, well, she drowned in the tub. And I was like, oh, well, could it have been an accident? Could she have slipped and fallen, or something like that? He said, well, no, they think it was a suicide because she was wearing a bathing suit. The logic being, she put the bathing suit on for modesty's sake, knowing that someone would find her body. And it turns out that a lot of times when people do commit suicide, they will, dress.
Sure.
They will make themselves presentable because they don't want to be found naked. They don't want to be.
Yeah.
And that is not, of course, indicative. It was just something that they were putting together. It's like, why would she wear a bathing suit in the tub? And so I had to tell this kid, I was like, I spoke to your grandmother, and she said she had a peeping Tom ghost, that she wore a bathing suit into the tub because she didn't, want a ghost to spy on her.
Okay. Wow. That's actually a kind of oddly heartwarming.
Well, and when I tell that story in its full scope, I usually mention that I think she had a thing for the ghost, and I think the ghost had a thing for her. I kind of like to think that they're still together to this day.
Aww.
But there's no indication that that's true, or that there was even a ghost. It was
Sure.
more her perception of what was happening.
Lovers separated
Yes,
by
exactly.
the veil. Oh, it's the next fantasy novel.
All right. On to the next one. Here we go. This is actually a really great question. And this is, did I forget to say the person's name last time? It was Lauren Osborne 2 asked, why do ghosts wear clothes? And then Kaylee Vickers asks, what is a place you wouldn't think has a grim history but does? Love that question.
So there's actually quite a few places like that in Savannah.
Yeah.
One of the places I always like to tell people about is Forsyth Park, for numerous reasons, but for one of them being that it's literally built on top of a bunch of underground tunnels. So Savannah has a bunch of hidden tunnels underneath it that they use for various reasons, but the ones underneath Forsyth were often used for body transportation. So a lot of times the Candler Hospital, that's also on Forsyth, they wouldn't have enough room for all the bodies, so where are you going to put them? In the tunnels. And so basically they eventually sealed it off and just left all the bodies there, which basically makes a mass grave. So when you're walking on top of Forsyth Park, it's so beautiful. There's parks, there's a restaurant, people are getting married, people are taking their birthday photos or whatever, but really they're standing on top of a mass grave and they have no idea, because it's such a beautiful place, but it's like the perfect analogy of like the ugly underbelly.
Yeah. I've actually been down into the morgue tunnels under Candler.
Of course you have, Chris.
And it's very bizarre because it kind of looks like a crypt, but the walls have these metal, they look like hooks. You like open them up, but that's where you would lay the platform that you would put the bodies on. And then as you go forward towards the park, it just starts getting, it's almost like steps that looks like you're going to walk out of the morgue into the park, but they just go right up to the ceiling and you can't go any further.
Oh, yeah. I wish that I could go into those tunnels. They've completely sealed them all off at this point. So.
Savannah actually, because in the 90s, there were 4 access points to tunnels under Savannah. And over the course of like 20 years, they sealed every single one of them up. Fascinatingly, because that's where they put all the utilities and stuff. But down right at the far west side of City Market, there was an access point, and you could just kind of like shimmy your way down, and you'd be in this kind of cool tunnel. And actually, every time they work downtown on the streets, every now and then it'll be wide open. And if you look down, you'll see these archways in the ground, and there'll be like street signs carved into the masonry. This is Bull Street, and this is you're like, they must have traveled through all this, because they always say that it was merchants' tunnels. They're bringing merchandise off of the boats and running them straight into Savannah, because Savannah's actually up on a bluff, and they would tunnel under it to build the bluff up, and they would just take all the merchandise through the tunnels.
Now, I'll tell you, the first thing that comes to mind for me is Right Square, because it is like, correct me if I'm wrong, but probably one of the most haunted places in Savannah.
Well, of
just
course.
all of the grim history that has happened there, but it's so pretty, and like there's trees, and there's beautiful oak trees, and the buildings are they're cutesy and all of that. But really, it was like the hanging square of Savannah.
The first burial place as well.
Alice Riley was executed in that square. What else? You always told me
About the CVS?
no, not about the CVS. It was about the they would sentence you to death, hang you, and then bury you, and it was all like this process.
Mm-hmm.
Remember in the beginning, like when we were first dating, and you were like trying to swoon me, and it worked, and you were telling me about the process.
Yeah. So, and I have mentioned this on the podcast before, where Right Square was literally the one-stop shop for the justice system.
That's true.
That's what it was.
It's the best way to describe it, because you went from the CVS, which is the old jail, and then you would hop on over to the gallows in the square, and then they would easily be able to just take you over to the cemetery right there. So it's
and it's interesting because the cemetery, the main one. That's actually where I had my first ghost encounter living in Savannah, was in that building where the old cemetery was. But that cemetery was the proper cemetery. There's a lot of talk about the convict cemetery being because there's the jail, and so they're talking about it being in the jail yard, which is right behind the CVS. That northwestern corner of Right Square and because Savannah's really good at suppressing information.
Absolutely.
It's very hard to find all those, what we know from a lot of other people diligently searching. But if you go down and you try to find and map out all these things, you know that it was unlikely that they buried convicts along with the first citizens. It's very unlikely that you would put slaves with slave owners in a single cemetery. So that really raises that question. It's where was the convict cemetery? And then, even more so, there is no sign of the convict cemetery anywhere else. It's not like we moved the bodies and gave them a spot. So there's a good chance that those convicts are still right where they were all those years ago.
Yeah, and that is interesting, because there's a lot there. I mean, there's been multiple cemeteries in Savannah.
I think 4 in the downtown area got consolidated. Mm-hmm. And then there were 2 missing, 2 that they don't talk about.
Yeah. Well, and that does bring up the point, it is hard to trace back things that happened in the 1700s and 1800s, especially in a city that wasn't so great about documenting things.
And these are not things that they would even consider to document.
Exactly.
It was not important to them. So why would they spend any amount of time talking about it? Any mention of it was either through a journal or through a mention in the sentencing or something like that. But for the most part, a lot of it we don't know.
All right, moving on. Let's see. I thought spirits can't cross water, in reference to the crying woman story, and that is called Dune Real Estate. Ask that.
Absolutely, that is a common belief. As a matter of fact, Haint Blue is oftentimes cited as the color of water to keep spirits from crossing over it. However, when you think about the numerous ghost stories that you may have heard, there's the Flying Dutchman, there are pirate ghosts, there are ghost ships, all those things about can a ghost cross over water. It depends on regionality. It depends on where they may have come from in societal concepts. And the main belief behind why a spirit cannot cross over water comes from a belief in river spirits. because it was actually believed that we couldn't, as human beings, cross over water without angering the spirits of the water. London bridges is an excellent example of this idea that in order to build the London Bridge, it is believed that they sacrificed a woman to appease the river spirits so that it wouldn't knock the bridge down. London Bridge is falling down, falling down, falling down. London Bridge is falling down. My fair lady. And the next chorus is like, lock her up and throw away the key. Because the belief was a river spirit will knock over any attempt to cross it if you don't appease it, if you don't pay it something. So there's a lot of superstition around crossing water, not just spirits, but humans as well. However, when you're dealing with whether a spirit can cross over water, it really becomes about what are they connected to. If they're connected to something that you can carry or move, if they're connected to a person, if the person crosses over water, the spirit's not going to let go of the person. But if the connection's weak, it might. As you go over water, it might let go. But that also depends on the faith of the spirit. Maybe the spirit doesn't believe in water spirits or the fact that you can't cross over water. A lot of rules that we make are just enforced for the sole purpose of protecting us against spirits who follow the same rules.
Yes. Yeah, I was going to actually say the same thing. That story is about an attachment spirit. So, it would be ridiculous to think the woman is walking and the attachment spirit's like, oh, there's a puddle. Can't go with you any further. Sorry.
Although worth noting that in that story, and I don't have an answer for it, the spirit never walked into a building. And I don't know anything about this spirit. And that's another thing is, I hate to admit that I do not follow up on these stories. I don't, I get them. Somebody tells me a story and I'm like, that's a great story. But I don't think, I'll check in every 5 years and see how it's going. Or, it doesn't occur to me to solidify it because in my trade, I'm not a ghost hunter. I'm a ghost story collector. So once I have a ghost story, I'm satisfied. I don't necessarily think, I need to know more, because the ghost story is pretty, that one was pretty self-contained. It was like, that's really creepy. I'll just put it in my big creepy shelf. And I pull it out when people will discuss ghosts that have a similar vein. But I don't have an answer.
But you also do hunt ghosts, though. I know that.
But I'm never hunting a ghost. I'm hunting a story. I'm trying to get a story out of it. So when I go on a ghost investigation, I am not looking for evidence or proof. I don't need it, I believe. What I'm looking for is an experience that I can turn into a story, an experience that I can relay to somebody else.
I like that.
And that changes the nature of any investigation that I go on. I am not trying to convince anyone else of anything. I'm trying to walk away with a good story. And that becomes this interesting thing because a lot of people will challenge the story. It's like, but it's just the story. Take the story at story value. I don't necessarily need anyone to believe me. It doesn't serve me. It doesn't make anything of it. But it can help you. If you have a similar situation, at the very least, it can make you see that you're not alone. At the very most, there might be an answer there. There might be something that informs you. But for the most part, I do not chase ghosts. I do not, in the sense of I can't get rid of your ghost for you. I don't have the means to communicate with ghosts. I'm not a medium or a psychic or anything like that. But what I am is a lover of a good story. So if you tell me a good story, I will take it and I will tell it whenever anybody says, I saw, this six-eyed monster. It's like, there's a demon that has 6 eyes and it preys on children. So, there are stories that serve as, I know this and I see this. Also worth mentioning, some people have experiences that they will never tell anyone because they are afraid of ridicule, because they are afraid that people will not believe them, because they are afraid that the perception of them will be so negative that they keep it to themselves. And I beg you to accept people's stories, because sometimes a ghost story is just a scary mask that is sitting on top of some true trauma that haunts them. Let them tell their story, listen to it, and let them have it. don't argue with them. I've seen it too many times. People are hurting, or they're trying to achieve something, or they're questioning something, and they get ridiculed for it. So if you can help it, just be open and let people have their stories, because sometimes it's the coping mechanism. Sometimes it's what they have developed as a protection against something that is very harmful to them.
And boom goes dynamite. That was awesome. All right. You heard it here first, kids. All right. Any stories about the Hamilton Turner Inn? Big weird one.
Oh boy.
So many.
So
We could do an entire episode on that.
oh,
too.
absolutely.
Maybe
So
we
a lot
will.
of people know the Hamilton Turner Inn because people love to say that it was what Walt Disney stayed in to create the Haunted Mansion,
Yes.
which I am a huge fan of the Haunted Mansion. But there's also like 5 other
Yeah,
places.
the Myrtles in
Yeah.
Louisiana. But there is documented proof that Disney would visit Henry Ford and Richmond Hill. So there is connective
Absolutely.
concept, but that is all conjecture.
Yeah, and it's so it is very subjective if that is the original inspiration. Nobody really knows which one exactly it is.
The first, I wanted to say the first story that I heard about the Hamilton Turner Inn, that's the one with that window up top that we pass, and I tell you about the girl
It's right
hanging?
across from
hanging
the
girl?
Angelo
Is
house.
it the hanging girl one?
Maybe. I don't personally
I
know
think
a
that's
hanging girl
the Kehoe
story.
house.
Yeah.
No, this one it's in a square, and it was the first ghost tour I ever took here when I was like real young, and they said that when you look up at like 3 a.m., when you look up at the 3rd story in a window, there is the shadow, the silhouette of a woman hanging.
I know what
Is
you're
that
talking about, but I don't think that is the house.
I think that's the Kehoe house.
Oh,
I think
okay.
I've heard that story from the Kehoe house because sometimes the attic light will be on in the Kehoe house, and that derived the story of the hanging person.
Gotcha.
Because the Kehoe house, which is near the Davenport house, which we've spoken of, and you have that photo from, was the old gates to Savannah.
Okay.
And the belief was that at the old gates, they sometimes would hang bodies.
Sure.
Again, no proof.
Yeah.
Just one of those stories you tell.
Well, what are some good stories about the Hamilton Turner Inn?
My personal favorite is there's questions whether it was Mr. Hamilton himself or the guard, but there's allegedly this man who
The rooftop ghost?
Yes, the rooftop ghost, the guy who sits on the roof, smokes a cigar, and is guarding the home. It's my favorite story from that house because the way I learned the story, and like I said, it could be one or the other, but I always learned it that because the Hamilton family, they were the first house to have electricity.
That's right.
And so a lot of times people would come to stand in the square and watch the parties that would happen in their home because they would throw these massive, lavish like soirees, but only the Savannah elite would be invited to them. So if you were not one of those, but you still wanted to watch all of the fun things that happened, you just pack a picnic and sit in the square and watch it happen. But eventually, to kind of guard the home and whatnot, they hired a man to just stand out front and do his security job so that the guests could walk home in safety. But there was this saying that like he basically was too focused on smoking his cigars that he wasn't watching his back. And the next morning after a party, they found the guard on the front steps in a puddle of his own blood. And so now people believe that they see this guard sitting up on the roof smoking a cigar. But there was also the story that after the guard died, Mr. Hamilton took up being the guard for the home while the parties were happening, and that he would sit up on the roof looking for someone to show up or something.
Yeah,
So-
there's so many great stories about the Hamilton Turner Inn. One of my favorites is these lavish parties, again, were a big part of it. The idea that the children were not allowed in these parties, so they would stay upstairs. But in order to sneak peeks into the party and sneak peeks into it, they would actually roll a billiard ball down the stairs and then come chasing after it, saying that it jumped off the table so that they could see the party going on. And one of the big things is people hearing a billiard ball rolling down these hardwood stairs, this loud cacophonous ball rolling down. And I even had a friend who claimed that he, classic friend of the friend story, that he knew somebody who had a billiard ball that was found in the building, but no one could figure out where it came from. They were like,
that's so interesting.
and easily it could have just been a guest who knew the story and was just messing with people. But at the same time, it's a great little tidbit. So like one of my favorite stories of it was William Pugh Hamilton, who was also the president of the electric company. He made a big deal about his house having electricity, and everyone came to the square to watch it light up for the first time. And some people actually thought it was going to explode. But being aware of all paranormal trends, most people understand that electricity is a draw for supernatural forces, that electricity is a type of nourishment. The classic, the battery's dead in my camera and I just charged it. That sensation of the only building in a town full of ghosts turning on its lights, it's very possible that you're just dealing with lots of characters roaming through the building. And before it was an inn, it was actually one of the houses spoken of in Midnight in the Garden, Good and Evil. It was one of the little party houses that Joe Odom owned and operated, and it was where Nancy did her cabaret show, and so it was kind of like a weird boarding house of types.
Yes.
It was also home to the deathbed, and we'll talk about that some other day.
Yeah, I love that story about the kids with the billiards ball. Yeah. I used to tell that on my tours all the time whenever we passed the Hamilton Turner Inn, because I love the concept of Mr. Hamilton being like, I don't want the kids at the party, so what am I going to do? I'm going to buy him a billiards table. I'm like, 5 to 10-year-olds, they're not going to stay occupied with a billiards table for very long. Of course they're going to find something to do with that. I'm like, so and it's funny when people still reports hearing the billiards balls or hearing the kids running and things like that. I'm like, I'm sure they did that so many times that they've definitely left an impression on that house of some kind of residual energy.
For sure. All right, and the last question, then we're going to go ahead and wrap it on up. Do you offer a tour?
Yes, actually. So we have a...
Oh, that was the Oddest Goddess, by the way.
Oh, thank you. But yes, so we actually do offer a tour. We partnered with Kelly Tours here in Savannah, so it's a nice trolley tour, nice and air conditioned. But it's an immersive tour, and I personally wrote it myself with JT, with all of my favorite stories of Savannah's history. And we take you around Savannah, tell you about that, and prepare you for the immersive experience that you're going to have here at the Savannah Underground. I give the tour a lot, which is really fun. So if you wanted to come take a tour with me, you're more than welcome to. Definitely reach out to us if that's something you're interested in.
And Chris, do you still do private tours?
I have been known to give tours. I used to give a walking tour for about 15 years, and I kind of peeled away from it. I know this is going to sound weird, but I never wanted to be a ghost guy. That was never my goal. I just love ghost stories. So somehow I fell into giving tours, and I gave tours for a long time, but it was never my passion per se. No, that's incorrect. I'm very passionate about ghosts. I'm just not very passionate about monetizing it.
Sure. Also, if you ever do want to take a private tour, I am totally open to giving private tours at any time. So that is something you're interested in, reach out to us. But with that being said, and that nice little plug, so let's go ahead and start wrapping things up. But we are going to have 3 episodes up this week for you. So we do episodes every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. Also, look forward to watching some content from St. Augustine. Oh, yes.
Woo woo.
Hitting the road. Yes, for my birthday, JT and I are going down to St. Augustine, and we're going to film a little bit of spooky content while we're there. So,
Yeah, it's going to be kind of like a mobile podcast.
yeah, it'll be fun.
We're going to be doing that. As kind of like a tester for some investigations that we're going to do. I know we have the Grave Face Museum investigation coming up. And we are going to interview Chloe Graveface, I believe, in a week from today.
Yeah.
So that'll be fun. That's the building with the most John Wayne Gacy paintings in the world in one room. There are like hundreds. Ryan Graveface and Chloe Graveface, the two owners, they are pretty wicked people. So it's gonna be really cool.
They also have a haunted seance table that I cannot wait to investigate because it is they have so many freaky things in there.
So we're going to be doing an investigation of a museum that has possibly, over 100 haunted objects because that's all the man does, just collect
in a haunted building,
crap.
And
too.
a very haunted building, on top of that.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So it's going to be exciting.
Yeah.
But, all right, that sounds good.
All right. Well, with that being said, thank you guys so much for listening. Make sure to follow us on social media under the Savannah Underground on TikTok and Savannah Underground on Instagram. And with that, my name is Madison Timmons.
I'm Chris Susi.
And stay spooky, y'all.